Welcome, fellow travelers, to the other worlds. Let us guide you while we explore the realms of fantasy, supernatural, and the paranormal, and meet with their storytellers, who transport us to other worlds and bring magic and wonder into ours. Let's open the portal to the other worlds and welcome our guest. I am Sandra Tan, and today I am joined by Carissa Broadbent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to chat with you. I also, in the worst timing ever, so just will set the tone for this chat. I had like half a sneeze happening like the minute that this conversation recording button was pressed.
Oh,
So
oh
it's
my
all
God.
downhill from here.
I feel your pain because I think as authors, you think about writing and you think about spending time in front of your computer or whatever form you choose, right? If you write longhand or if you use a typewriter, I don't know if anybody still does that, but you think about spending time alone and you don't think so much about the fact that you're going to need to eventually, bless you, you're going
Thank
to
you.
need to eventually talk to people and appear in front of people potentially and sign books and answer questions. And how did you adjust to that side of author life?
It's pretty weird. It's still weird to me that anybody would want to like listen to whatever I ramble on about. And it was kind of when I started off independently published, self-published, which also set my expectations in a certain place in terms of like self-published authors, even very successful self-published authors who are like making a lot of money and everything, are usually it's like the promotional like sphere is just very different than it is in traditional publishing. Like most self-published authors have no intention, at least when I was coming up, of being like a personality. You know, like you're not doing the in-person events because you largely, can't work with bookstores and stuff. So it's like something that you never expect to do. And then kind of my more mainstream success, a lot of it happened, I had a baby, like it happened fast and I was distracted and there was a lot going on in my personal life. And then I had my first ever event and I was like, oh my gosh, like it's so strange to go from like, you're kind of, I was of course aware that I had an audience, like I saw the numbers going up and things like that, but it's very different to be in a room with 100 people who showed up to see you. And you just want to be like, oh, I'm not that special, like, like, thank you. But it's just a weird sensation.
Yeah, it's
Very flattering though.
flattering, but still quite an adjustment. Because nobody teaches you how to deal with things like, oh, I feel like I need to sneeze in the middle of an interview, right? How do you deal with those
Right,
things?
right.
You know,
Well, that's
and
how you put it at part of your brand as being like relatable because we all sneeze, right? So I figure everybody sneezes. We all know. We all get it.
yeah, that's a good way to look at it, a healthy way to look at it. You know, so I have to ask, I mean, I need to know like how many candles, what kind of symbols are involved? Is it on a full moon? Like, what is your ritual when it comes time to get a new cover? Because you have been blessed by the book cover gods. And you, every time I see one of your covers, I feel very much like I know it instantly that it's yours as well. And I'm just kind of wondering how all that came about because I know you have some design background, but you've also talked in other interviews about letting professionals do their thing and leaving them to their space and trusting them to do their jobs. So, how have you got this design going that is working so well and that is so good for defining your brand?
Okay. That is a great question, and thank you so much. That's such high praise, even though I can't take the praise because, as you mentioned, I do believe in like letting professionals do their jobs essentially. Like my favorite part of this job, and I don't even think I'm exaggerating here. Like I think it is definitely like top five things that I love about my dream job that I'm fortunate enough to live is that I get to work with such immensely talented people. So I've been fortunate enough that for most of my covers, because I started off self-published, I was the one who chose the artist and kind of like art directed, the covers. And I just get to work with like the most immensely talented people, like Katie Ritchie, who did the covers for all of the Nyaxia books, including the new Slaying the Vampire Conqueror cover. And then Long did the illustrations for the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, the original ones. And the new covers for the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, which is being picked up and republished by Bramble later this year. I was fortunate enough that I kind of started that process independent as well. So I had the freedom to kind of like pick the artist, and the artist who is doing it is one of my favorite artists ever. Like I just treat this job as being in like a candy shop of like immensely talented artists, and I just want to work with everybody. It's my favorite.
Well, that's great. I mean, like that you get the opportunity to work with so many incredible professionals because you've also talked about your love of commissioning art of your
Mhm.
characters as well. And is that something, do you display that? Like as somebody who has an artistic background, do you think very visually when you're writing?
I actually don't, which is as surprising to me as it is to everybody else. Like, I don't know. I think in like sensations. Like I don't think super visually, but that's part of why I actually love getting art commissioned because I love seeing the different ways that artists envision my characters. Like I really loved once I started kind of getting more a bigger mainstream audience. I started getting more opportunities to work with artists who were like readers themselves and were kind of independently fans of the series themselves. And I love commissioning artists who are readers as well, because I love seeing like kind of their genuine, like I will just say to them, draw whatever you want. Like I will pay you to just draw whatever inspires you about this book. And I just get like the most incredible like visual depictions of like characters or scenes. And like sometimes they are exactly what I envisioned in my head. And sometimes they're a little bit different, but both of those things are equally exciting to me, because you get to see so many different like visual explorations of your work.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it opens the door sometimes that you go like, "Oh, that's really neat. I never thought about it from that perspective." When you're seeing how somebody else
Yeah.
looks at it. So,
So one thing that's actually really surprising to most people is that, especially when I was indie, so indie authors will often commission covers for books that are not coming out for years, that are not written yet. So all of the Nyaxia covers, yeah, like all of them. I think when I commissioned all six covers of the main series, I had not started typing one word of the entire series. So all of those, and it was like the loosest vibes, that I had like for each book. And then of course we do have to tweak things sometimes, like once it's done. But it's kind of nice, like for when you're self-published, things move so fast and artists can get booked up for like years in advance. So it kind of makes sense logistically to just like if you have an artist's time, just get everything at once, and then you know that your schedule is not going to be bound to like the artist's availability in the future. But the most fun example of that was the original cover of Slaying the Vampire Conqueror for the multi-author series when it was initially published independently. And it's like this beautiful illustrated cover of like the main couple by Natalie Bernard, who is a fantastic artist, and she was so lovely to work with. But we had like some scheduling issues with like the multi-author series, and I ended up going first. And it was like way before that book was due. Meaning, not only had I not typed a word of it, but I hadn't even outlined it, like it was very much like a twinkle in my eye what the concept was. And I actually kind of love that though, because you give this artist these descriptions and you're just kind of brainstorming. You're like, well, it would be cool if she had a dress like this, and it would be cool if you had a weapon like this, and the background will be this kind of vibe. And it kind of provides like an inspiration to work from, like once you start writing the book. So her artwork actually inspired the book tremendously in a way that like is unique to that book. It was kind of a fun experience.
Well, that's cool. Now, it leads right into a question that I have about slaying the Vampire Conqueror, and I'm probably going to pronounce things incorrectly, so just tell me when I've gotten it wrong.
Oh
But
yeah, half the time I get it wrong too.
okay, the Arakesan, or I'm not sure how to say it, Arakesan.
Good job, Arkessen. Yep.
Okay, the Arakesan. Um, I don't want to give anything particular away for anyone who hasn't read the book, but there's a particular ritual that's involved in joining that group. And I'm just wondering, okay, so who hurt you? Or was it somebody who hurt your artist? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I know. I just love my favorite thing about writing the Nyaxia world in general is that it is so big and it is so varied. And what I was really excited about, this was my first, nope, it was not. It was not, but it was, this is a spin-off of the original series. So it takes place in a country that is not Obitrace, which is like the vampire kingdom that the main Crowns of Nyaxia series takes place in. And I love being able to show a different corner of that world and show that each of the gods has kind of this very intense following, this intense magic system around them, like these very deep, like varied cultural like expectations around their followers. And I love writing about cults. I love inventing cults. And like the darker and more fucked up, the better. So I really just ran with it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I was actually going to ask you a little bit about cults. And I was thinking when I was reading Slaying the Vampire Conqueror that there really is the subtext going on of how controlling knowledge is a tactic that's used to manipulate people. And and that's very prevalent. And I'm currently actually halfway through The Songbird and The Heart of Stone. And
Mm.
in some ways there are also some very similar themes underneath that. And I was going to ask you, like, do you study cults? You write a lot about misplaced faith in your books. Where does that all come from?
It's unintentional, honestly. Like I really I think there's something about that kind of an arc that's very interesting to me. Like at its heart, being able to write a story about a character who comes to see the world very differently than they start the book off doing, which ultimately like every story is that in some way, like every story shows a character changing in some way. But I think um like Selena's story in Slaying the Vampire Conqueror and like Misha has a very similar kind of arc in Songbird where like these are characters who have been like very heavily indoctrinated into their like religious situation. And my favorite part, like I said earlier, about writing this world, the Nyaxia world, is that it is so varied and so different, and that even the characters themselves are in these kind of little pockets of isolated knowledge that they then have to like break out of in different ways. And I just find that compelling. I actually didn't consciously realize that all three of the four like Nyaxia female main characters have kind of a learning to question faith and authority kind of arc until I've started writing Nyaxia book 5. I almost just said the title that I was not supposed to say out loud. And that female main character has like she has very much not that arc. Like she is just a stone cold cynic who doesn't believe in anything. And I didn't realize how much I've done that until I started writing her. And I was like, wow, this is different. This is refreshing. I kind of like this.
Oh, that sounds like it will be fun, though. I mean, you don't want all of your characters to sound the same or feel the same. You want them each to have their own journey. And I think that's part of what's very interesting. I mean, if I was going to ask you for any kind of spoiler, which I know that you won't give, I'd be curious to know whether or not Selena is ever going to consider making a significant life change that will ex extend her lifespan.
Yes. Okay. So I I love how you say, "Oh, you're not going to give spoilers," because my husband calls me Carissa Spoiler Alert Broadbent, and like the darker and more fucked up, the better. So I really just ran with it. And I am terrible at keeping secrets. If I am left unattended, I will just spew everything. But I do feel comfortable saying this. So for folks who have read Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, I've gotten a lot of I've gotten a lot of messages and comments from people kind of being like, it's not really a happily ever after, which it kind of isn't. I mean, their situation is not sustainable, at the end of that book. Like they they have a romance and their romance has their happily ever after, meaning their romance has come to its conclusion, but like their life situation is like a little messy, like there's all kinds of stuff. So yes, their story is not resolved or finished, and they do turn up in subsequent books in the main Nyaxia series, maybe relatively soon.
Ooh, well, I'm looking forward to finding out what happens. I actually already have an advanced copy of The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk, so
Oh, okay, okay. All right, so you will know soon.
yes, theoretically, I don't have to wait long. The only problem with reading things ahead of other people is that you can't talk about it then. So,
I
I mean,
know.
you live with it, but for readers, it's like you don't, and I don't want to give things away for people that as well that would, significantly impact their enjoyment of a book because, while I am not bothered by spoilers in a lot of cases, I have,
Mm.
I get anxious. And so then I'll look up spoilers so that I'm less stressed while reading. So,
I also spoil myself all the time. I am right there with you.
okay, so I'm not the only person who's doing that. Whew. But but other people feel very strongly about it, and so there's that
Mhm.
constant balance of trying to be careful with what you say. So that's my only debate about when to read it because I'm like, once I read it, then I'm not going to be able to talk about it, but I'm going to know. So, and when my husband and I
Yeah.
read the same book. Will get into a conversation, and so often I will slip on something that he hasn't gotten to yet. It just comes out. So I
I
relate.
know, I know. I do it all the time as well with my husband, that exact same thing.
All right. So also in Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, you tackle the theme of addiction in that book, and I was wondering why it was important for you to address that issue.
I think ultimately, that book is about like the many different ways that people cope with untenable situations and often are very judgmental of other people who cope with those untenable situations in different ways. So without getting too far into specifics of the book, because to your point, I tend to be spoilery and I'm trying not to, but that was really the mirror that I was trying to hold up in that particular aspect of that book. Especially because three characters, both of the main leads and like a major supporting character are kind of dealing with it in different ways. One person dealing with it in kind of the way that we traditionally think of addiction in our world, like dealing with drug addiction essentially in our world. But everyone in that book is kind of using their own escape hatch in different ways that really reflect each other.
Yeah, it's an interesting story arc because I've been thinking about this a lot while reading Songbird as well. I didn't read them back to back, but I've read Slang and Songbird very close together. And I was thinking about the fact that so often we associate vampires with death, with darkness, even with evil in a lot of lore. And then we have what you're doing with your series. And what's interesting to me is how much heart that there actually is amongst the vampires and how you're showing just how much evil people perpetuate. And then you have some of these vampire characters who are really healers in their own way. And I was curious whether that was something that you deliberately wanted to put a different spin on vampires or whether you wanted to, contrast them to people and show that we're really essentially all the same, even no matter where we are or where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I think people are people, regardless of whether they're human people or vampire people in the in this world. And even I really wanted to explore in this world. Part of my motivation for wanting to make such a big world right off the bat. So my previous series, the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, was like the best way I can describe it is it was like the world building was like I was pouring honey on the table and like letting it slowly spread out. Whereas when I sat down to start the Crowns of Nyaxia series, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to stake out the bounds of this world. So, I knew that the magic system was going to be God based and there were going to be 13 gods and like there was going to, and even though I didn't answer all those questions right away, like there is a ton about this world that even I do not know yet because I haven't explored this particular corner of it. But I knew I wanted it to be huge in the sense that like okay, the vampires have their own country and they have all of these like very complex power dynamics like even within themselves, like they are not just like this mono society where everybody is the same. Within themselves they have power dynamics, within their individual kingdoms they have them. So with this book in particular, I was excited to get to explore the House of Blood because they are um, treated as villains in other books. They are obviously villains in this book in some ways, but they are also, you see a bit more of them like as victims themselves. Because I believe that in life, like human, vampire, fantasy, real life, whatever, like you're never just one thing. You can be a victim and a perpetrator at the same time, or you can be like somebody who has more power in this dynamic and someone who has less power in a different dynamic, but you're still the same person or in the same position. So that is one of my most fun things that I love to explore in this world.
Well, that comes out really well in the books and it's interesting because it's like really and truly most people are shades of gray. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
somebody says like, "Oh, this person is such a good person," it's you it's from a certain perspective. And we're all complex and we all make mistakes, which is something that you get to explore in your books. And in an interview, you actually said that the emotional journey was the most important part when you
Mm-hmm.
were writing. And um, and I was curious, since becoming a parent, has that impacted how you look at certain circumstances in your books? Like, do you look back on Vincent and what he was dealing with differently since becoming a parent?
That is a great question. So actually, I think me writing Vincent was like me grappling, oh my God, not to like liken myself to Vincent. But I was not, so I wasn't pregnant when I wrote that book, but like I knew that I was trying to conceive, relatively soon. So like the theme of parenthood was on my mind. And I was just one of my big inspirational like questions that kind of planted the seed for a lot of the main emotional arcs in that duology was like, do monsters still love their children? And like that makes you like Vincent was not a good father, but he loved his daughter like very much, but that didn't make him a good father. Like it's I wanted to kind of explore all of those complexities. I get asked sometimes, one time someone asked me very politely and very tactfully. She was kind of like, well, you write like such dark stuff. Like she was kind of being like, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you write like such like dark, like violent things? And I think it's like I'm a very anxious person and it's my way of like peering into the void and kind of exploring these like extremely dark circumstances and then kind of finding the light within them in some way. Even these deeply flawed people, these deeply flawed circumstances, like these like immense suffering beyond any that I could imagine in real life, you know, and trying to find the light and like the love within those situations, even if it's imperfect at times. Um, but yeah, it has in some ways. Like I'm a lot more sensitive than I was like now, particularly to like child endangerment, like things about like children suffering in real life. It's horrific. In fiction, it's horrific. And like there have been times that I don't know, like I'm without getting too specific. There are certain things that I'm working on now that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this. It's yeah. So yeah, it does. It does change things sometimes.
Makes it a little harder to tackle some of those deep issues because you have a lot of issues involving children in your books to date. I mean,
I
certainly
do, yeah.
his story, is a tragic story. So is Selena's. I mean,
Mm.
and things started very early for them, in terms of putting them on the path that they're on, uh, and it's very powerful and impactful when you're reading it, but it's also very tragic. And so I can imagine it must be, there must be some feelings going back and revisiting that and thinking about that as a parent now.
Yeah, it gets dark sometimes. And there gets sometimes it gets darker than that, which is there's sometimes I think of something and I'm like, oh, is this too much even for me? You know, like I write some pretty dark things at times, but it's yeah, I don't know why I do it. I do think that sometimes my writing explores things that I find personally like terrifying, you know, that's part of why I do it, you know, to peer into the void of it.
Does it help you overcome your fears yourself to face dark things?
Maybe it does. I don't know. Do you see? I don't, whoever's listening, you can't see my face right now, but I'm kind of like staring off into the distance, like, yeah, maybe, maybe this is the seed that started it all. Could be, potentially. Am I more well adjusted than I would have been? Who knows? I could be worse than this.
Oh, that you should put that on a t-shirt for your next convention. I could be worse.
Yes, I could be even worse. Can you imagine?
I actually could see myself wearing that on a t-shirt. That would be so fitting.
Yeah, we should make that happen. We'll make that happen.
Oh, well, it is interesting because you do confront so many things when as a writer, and it does give you license to put yourself into somebody else's shoes in a different kind of way that you would never experience in your real life. With that said, I am curious if you've ever taken fencing or had somebody give you lessons with a sword or anything like that in preparation for your writing.
No, but I should. I should. You know, maybe some like casual ritual sacrifice. Like I should try. I should try it all out in real life and see.
Just really just take that to as far as you can take it there.
Yeah, you
Casual
know,
ritual
just list it
sacrifice.
off. Oh yeah, baking, sewing, fencing, ritual sacrifice. Sure, let's try it.
Sure, why not? Right? All right. So, since we're getting close to the end here to wrap things up, do you want to play a little game?
Oh, I love games. Okay, great. I'm
Okay.
terrible at them. I'll just warn you.
Well, there's technically no right and wrong answers, really. Right. So, I have the four main relationships that you delve into in the Crowns of Nyaxia books, to date: Rain and Araya, Vale and Lilith, Assam and Mishe, and Atreus. Is it Atreus or
Mhm.
okay,
Yep,
and
yep.
Selena? Okay, so I have those four couples, and then I have they all get transported into our world, and they're
Oh,
going to go
okay.
out. Each couple is going to go out on their own human type of date night. And I have
Ooh,
the four
okay.
dates here, and I've got a clue for each of them. One is air, two is crowds, three is sharp, and four is beat. So for each couple, you can start with one at a time. Which couple would you choose for the air date, or crowds, sharp, or beat?
Is beat like BEAT?
BEAT. Yeah. Not
BEAT,
not
like
like
a
not the kind that you eat.
Okay, I was so confused. I was like, they're both red. They're vampires, so maybe
Like think like tap, tap, tap.
like a
Like that
rhythm.
kind of beat. Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right. So I'm matching couple to hint.
Yep. And you can do it one at a time if
Okay.
you want. So
All right. So which one, what was the first clue again?
first clue is air.
Air. Well, that's got to be Rain and Araya, right? Because they fly. So
Okay. So Rain and Araya are going to a trampoline park. Would they
I
have a good
can see
time?
that.
You can
I
see
think
that?
they would. Well, Rain would be all about it. I feel like Araya would just kind of like sulk on the sidelines until forcibly dragged into the trampoline park. I feel like she would be like, I can't, I'm a queen. I can't humiliate myself in this manner, but fine.
Yeah, Araya really is all about self-punishment in some circumstances. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all right. So, which one do you think that Vale and Lilith would pick? Crowds, sharp, or beat?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if they like any of those things. I'll go sharp just because they both hate crowds. Like I can't see that.
How would they like a night axe throwing?
I could see that. I could see that.
You can see that?
I can see that happening. Yeah, I can see that happening.
Who do you think would be better?
Oh, well, Vale, obviously, but but Lilith would give it her all. She would really try.
Yeah, Lilith is all embracing every opportunity, really. She's such a
Yes, yes,
fascinating
she is.
character.
I
So,
think she would take it very seriously. And she would be good eventually, you know? Like I think that would be good. And actually I think that Vale would be all about that because it's practical, right? Like she's you know, a high ranking like noble in like a kingdom that's at war with like four different places. So it's good for her to learn how to throw some sharp things.
well, yeah. So that's a night well spent then. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have crowds and beat left, and we have Assam and Misha and Atris and Selena. So
Oh, I don't really see them being crowd people, but I've gotta okay. So
you gotta do.
obviously Beat has to be Asar and Misha because they are the musical ones. So that's got to be them.
All right. So they are going to spend their night doing karaoke.
Oh my God. I can very, very vividly depict that. Misha would love it. Asar would hate it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, oh, all right, so what would Assam be singing?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, she would go for like the full-on power ballad, you know, like power ballad duet, like drag him into that. I can very vividly see that happening. It'll be great.
I could see him resisting the whole way.
No, he'll do it. He's like the biggest, he is like the most obsessed out of any male main character I've ever written. Like, especially in Fallen, like he is like, he would do anything. So he'll do it, but he'll resent it, but he will do it.
He'll resent it, but he'll do it. That's great.
He'll do it. He'll do it.
That's exactly how we want a man to be, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. He would do anything.
All right, so that leaves us with Atreus and Selena, and their date night is with the crowds at a rave.
Yes. At a rave. Oh my God. You know, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe I can see it. I could see Selena being like a real partier, maybe, if she was in like the right situation. Yeah, she'd take it very seriously. I don't know. I don't know how that would go over with Atreus, but maybe he'd surprise us. We don't know.
Well, you never know really until people are put into that circumstance. And I don't want to give anything away, but I have a finished copy of Slaying the Vampire Conqueror that Bramble sent to me. So I've read the bonus ending. So I was thinking about that and I was thinking, you know what? Maybe he really would. I mean, he seems to be really making an effort.
He is, I will say, the House of Blood is the most, we haven't, we've only gotten to see this a little bit in Slaying, but like all the vampire houses, the vampires are very brutal and competitive towards each other. except for the House of Blood, who is they are very cooperative and very loyal to each other. So I could extend that to them being good partiers, right? Like they could have a party because they actually get along with each other. They actually like each other. Unlike the others who will just like use the cover of darkness to stab each other, quietly.
Right. I was actually going to ask you if you had to choose which house to belong to, the House of Night, the House of Blood, or the House of Shadow, which one would you choose?
I think that I would choose the House of Shadow just because I would not physically survive the other ones. I just don't. Very clumsy. I always say the wrong thing. I don't think that I would survive. So the Shadow one, at least the Shadowborn, they're very brutal, but in like a real quiet way. Like if you just kind of like stay in the corner of the library and try to keep to yourself, that maybe you'll be okay. There is another answer I could give that would be immensely spoilery that I will not say, but that is my answer for now.
Fair enough. Okay, you have The Fallen and the Kiss of Dust coming out in August. You have Slaying the Vampire Conqueror coming out, the really re-release to trad next week. You have Daughter of No Worlds coming out in October, I believe it is, from Bramble,
Mhm.
and then the other two books in the War of Lost Hearts will follow. I'm not sure if do you have dates yet on those?
I
Or
do for Children of Fallen Gods, which is going to be in December. And then the third one, Mother of Death and Dawn, will be like quite soon after that. It's just not up for pre-order just yet.
So you have a lot going on, and I wish you all of the best with all of it. It's very exciting, but it must also be a little nerve-wracking. I was thinking between writing the next book and promoting all of these releases and having a child, when do you sleep?
Not well. My child is teething right now. It's been like a big, where I'm a little tired, but it is a very good problem to have. I'm very grateful to have this problem. But yeah, it's a heck of a year.
Yeah, it's an
Exciting stuff.
incredible year. Well, congratulations on all your success, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Thank you.